welcome back, everybody. So I think, is that everybody now? I think a minute has passed. Okay, so we've got another 13 minutes now for the end. So as yesterday, what we'll do is we'll go through some of the questions and the comments in the Google Doc first. Then we'll address any other questions or problems you may have run into that you want to raise now. And then we'll ask you to fill in a quick survey, see how you got on. So let's go through the Google Doc first. So if someone could put the link into the chat, just so it's handy for anyone. So we had a few questions come up that have been entered into the doc. So there was one from Rachel, which was to do with to help with unit tests for functions and more complex inputs. I understand there are packages such as Mock and Selenium can be used for testing browser-based services. Don't know much about them. Could you give us an overview? So I could give a quick overview now. I think those are two very valid things to raise. So with mocking is an approach to doing testing. So with testing, typically with any software, you're going to have some dependencies of some sort somewhere in your software. And with mocking, what that enables you to do is instead of using a dependency, what you're doing is you pretend you use that dependency. You set up something which attempts to look like and act like that thing which you would otherwise be using your software with. So if you're using an API or you're using a library, you'd create a mock object which pretends to do the same kind of thing. Why would you do this? One of the big reasons would be because perhaps using that library or using that API is very expensive. It could be expensive in terms of time or maybe even in cost. And maybe you don't have that much time to test. And maybe that's not what you want to test. Maybe you want to test the behavior of your code and not the dependency. So what you do is you create a mock object which pretends to do the same kind of thing, but feeds back not the data that you would actually get, but perhaps dummy data that's returned from that mock object. And then that means that instead of going through the laborious process of using that library, which may take some time to do some calculations or do some running, it basically feeds back that information very quickly from that mock object back to your code that you actually do wish to test. And that means that you don't have to go through the process of using all of these dependencies, which may take too long for testing. So this can simplify the way that you do your testing and make your testing process a lot more quickly. But it is dependent on the kinds of data you feed back from those mocks. So there's a link there if you're interested in learning more about mocking. With Selenium, this is a testing framework for browser-based services and applications. So with web applications, typically what you have is some code that outputs in some way, or is in some way, some HTML, or which then sort of like has other assets like CSS, styling, images, JavaScript. And it sends this to browsers, and these are sort of built in a display of the site, which the user can then see and interact with. But with Selenium, what you're doing is instead of sort of creating that and feeding it back, what you're doing is you're capturing it. So with Selenium, you can write tests that basically set up a particular test that you wish to run on your website, which could be, for example, perhaps submitting a particular form and then testing that the element in the HTML is the way you'd expect it when it returns, or perhaps something is changed in the web page, which is a result of the form. And then Selenium allows you to test the results of that by sort of testing to see what's changed and whether it's the way you expect it to be. So it's a way of sort of creating unit tests, but not for code that isn't web-based, but for code that is web-based. And I mean, you can test the different aspects of HTML and whatever is fed back to the browser just to test that it is the way you expect it in terms of how the test runs. And there's loads of support for Selenium for different languages. So you've got support for Java, Python, C#, Ruby, and Perl. So if you're doing web-based development, you can use Selenium to do that. I've used Selenium a little bit. It can be a little tricky to get grips with, and it can take a little while longer than it would be in my experience for writing unit tests which aren't web-based, but it can be very useful for that with the right environment. So I noticed also there was a point here from Pip answering a question on personal access tokens. So Pip, do you want to give a quick overview of that one? Or would you prefer I covered it? Oh, I think you're still on mute, sorry.
Yes, sorry. So this is the one about Git push being rejected. So we think GitHub might have had a a security update, and as standard, the access tokens no longer give you permission to edit workflows. This is quite useful because it basically means that you have to purposefully change continuous integrations rather than just having it on as default. But the way we found to fix this is just to, you go back to where you created your access token, click on it, and then there's a lot of checkboxes, and under the one that says repo, there's one that says workflow, which is just update GitHub workflow action workflows. Go down to the bottom, update the token, and then the push will start working rather than rejecting. We'll probably update some of the docs to make a note of that for the future.
Good stuff. Yes, of course. That would be a good thing to add in. Okay, I think there was a couple there that James was able to address in the questions. You want to give a quick summary there, James, or would you prefer me to do it?
No, I'm happy to. So let me just get that document up again. I've got it here on this tab. We had a question on software to check whether you're following best practices, and there's a lot of things in there that we wanted to check the best practices on. I'm not personally aware of a general tool which will check the full range of best practices, but there are many tools that will check a subset of best practices. The ones I've highlighted there in my answer are Linters, which are a class of tools which will check the style of your code and check for certain types of errors that you may have made in the code itself. And there is, that I've linked there, an optional extra section of these materials on linting that I think is probably worth looking through if you've got the time. If anyone does know of any other classes of tools, anyone can think of any classes of tools that they think are worth pointing out here as well, very welcome to add those to that answer. The other one I've mentioned there is auto formatters, which are really an extension of Linters, but they'll just modify the code for you automatically rather than you having to worry about it. Anything else that people should know about?
So there was one thing that I noted when I was looking at how pip uses PyCharm. So you can configure PyCharm so that you're opening a directory above a series of repositories, and by doing that, it enables you to have a high-level view of a lot of repositories you're working on. And I think there's a tool, and I'm sure Pip could help me here, that you can install, or a plugin that actually shows you the status in terms of Git for those repositories. Do you remember what that was? Was that Fish or something? Was it Pip, or am I misremembering?
No, that's Git Helper, I think.
Git Helper, thank you. Yes.
I just checked that because I might be talking.
Oh, well, the heat
nonsense.
to me, so I yeah, can understand. But that then would address the issue there. You know, sort of checking the status of those repositories. That's another one. Yeah, and there was that other one, James. Did you do a quick update for that, or? Of course,
I muted myself there. The other question there, which I answered, was about methods of creating environments and whether they all create an environment in the project folder. Some of them do, some of them don't. Every virtual environment tool works slightly differently. Conda by default will create the virtual environments in some central location, which varies based on the operating system you're using. I personally don't like that decision, but it works for many people. So as long as you know how your tool that you've chosen works, that's fine. Yeah,
okay, that's a good comprehensive answer. So that's good. So those are the questions we had. Did anyone else have any questions that arose as part of going through the material, or any other issues that you may have encountered? No. Okay, right.
Sorry, I just have a quick question. So I had kind of avoided doing the, setting up these packages where you're using all the code that you need for a particular project, because it seemed like you were just repeating software on your machine, saving versions again and again and again. So does it ever get to an issue where it's like running into disk space problems, trying to create a kind of virtual environment that would have everything you need?
So yeah, that's a good point. And it can become an issue, particularly if you're doing a lot of projects that involve the same sorts of software over and over and over again, and that software is pretty big, and you're installing it within the same version every single time. There are some solutions that make this a little more efficient. So there's one called Poetry, which James here has been using a bit of, I know, and that can actually help with doing that to some extent, I believe, by caching a lot of the dependencies for particular projects, and that's designed as a replacement for pip. It's a lot more sophisticated than pip. It does an awful lot more in terms of package management, updating your packages so that it can work with your software and you don't have to worry about that, and overall managing the packages that you use in projects. So Poetry is maybe one you want to look into for that. That's specifically for Python now. I don't think there's any other implementations of it, unless I'm mistaken.
So Poetry specifically is based on how the Node package manager works in JavaScript. So it's that sort of model. That is one of the advantages of Conda and the preference there for storing a virtual environment centrally, that if you do have exactly the same environment you need to use for multiple projects, you can just use the same one. So that is, I think, why they made that decision. In practice, disk space is cheap, so you tend not to run into limits of disk space with these things. Of course, you could, if you'd created hundreds of virtual environments with some massive dependencies in, that could happen, but I've never come across anyone with that issue in practice.
No, nor have I. The other thing you can do is, as long as you've got the requirements captured in a requirements.txt file anyway, and everything's been uploaded to version control, you can essentially you can erase your virtual environments as projects become sort of essentially not worked on, and then sort of reinstall those virtual environments later. That can be another way to do it. So as a matter of practice, when a project gets a little bit lean in terms of the effort you're putting into it, you can delete your virtual environments, just recreate them when you need to. That could be another way to do it. So I'm very conscious. Sorry, James, go on.
No, sorry, it's me. I think it's the sort of long and short of that one is most of the modern package managers, or the ones that have made an attempt to modernize, they will have all your packages in the background, and then just basically link into them to get the ones you need. Whereas the older ones, which are sort of more based on the JavaScript model of doing things, will just have the package there. And that's better for some things and not for others. But the principle of just using virtual environments is good. And as James, I think, and Steve has alluded to, it's so easy. Disk space is so cheap, and most of these packages are quite small. The reason why vend, and someone pointed this out in my group, vend is often put in the git ignore, however, is because you will start bloating up your git repository if you start versioning your vend file, because then if you do minor increments in your packages, they'll be tracked in git. You don't want that.
No, that's a good safety tip there. Right, so I noticed we had some questions put into the frequently asked questions list there as well. So hopefully you didn't run into any of those issues, but if you did, there's a record of them there. I'm very conscious of time, so I'm going to very quickly ask how people got on with the material in terms of progress. So do we want to vote to see where people got to in the material, or just go straight for the survey? Pip, Rachel, what do you think, given the time?
I'd be interested to know how everybody got on getting through the material.
No problems at all. We can do that. So you may have to keep an eagle eye on the reactions. I'm not sure I can see them. So I'm going to ask a quick question, quick set of questions, see where everyone got to. So with your Zoom reactions, a green tick or a red cross, let us know whether you completed the following episodes. So going backwards, the last episode, did you manage to complete diagnosing issues and improving robustness? Green tick for yes, red cross for no. Right, let's see.
Okay, really silly question, but how do you do the green tick? I don't see that as an option.
Yeah, I don't either. I just did thumbs up. Okay.
Okay, right. Thumbs up. My apologies. Let's use thumbs up. It hasn't been enabled on this one. So thumbs up instead if you managed to complete diagnosing issues and improving robustness. Apologies for that. Okay, right. Let's see. That's a lot of thumbs up. That's not bad. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 thumbs up. And if you did not manage to complete, let's go. So I'll assume that the others didn't manage to complete it. Let's go back a bit. For those that managed to complete continuous integration for automated testing, quick thumbs up there. Yeah. Okay, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And going back a bit further, scaling up unit testing. Thumbs up if you managed to complete that. Okay, and automatically testing software. Did you manage to complete that? So it looks like the majority of you managed to get to at least completing diagnosing issues and improving robustness, and some of you managed to get to the end of continuous integration for automated testing. Good. It gives us some indication, I think. Right, so the last thing I was going to ask you to do is to fill in a survey, very much like you did yesterday. Oh, thank you very much, Pip. Lightning fast there, and there it is in the chat. So if you click on that, an important safety tip here, please remember to select in the drop down at the top of that survey, section 2. So by default, I think it's section 1, but you need to make sure it's section 2, just so we get the data for that, for today's session. Okay. All right, we're 4 minutes over. So whilst you're doing that, is there anything else we need to cover? Rachel, Pip, or others?
Nothing from my side except to remind everybody we will be back at the same time tomorrow on the same Zoom channel.
Same time.
And now Rachel said that, absolutely nothing from me, apart from saying thank you everyone for attending. Thank you all the instructors. So yeah, have a lovely evening, day, sometime. And we will see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all very much.